Do you think recruiters hold the keys to your next job? Not exactly. Let's break down what you need to know about working with them.
Come on, Courtney, you mean recruiters are not the whole deal? Because from what I understand, you need recruiters to actually get you a job in tech. That's at least what I understood.
So, not quite, right? Let's start with where you can work with recruiters and how you can use recruiters to your benefit, okay? So, they're great to connect with, right? It's not like recruiters are useless, of course. And typically they have really strong followings on social media platforms, especially on LinkedIn. So it's a great way to have, an easy access to a large network. So connecting with them on LinkedIn is a great start, but you don't want to inundate them. There's so many opportunities to connect with other people on LinkedIn that can bring you more leverage in your job search. Now, for example, staffing agency recruiters, they're great to connect with and maybe start that developing of a relationship because they have a very large pool of job opportunities, right? They may be hiring for multiple companies. They're going to have a stronger connection with hiring managers in a lot of different spaces. So that's a connection that adds diversity to your network. But if you're looking at a recruiter that's just working at one company, right, they are going to have a role open maybe every once in a blue, right, that fits what you're looking for, even if they're in a tech company.
So basically, staffing agency recruiters, they have a bigger aperture on the marketplace itself.
Yeah. So
are you saying it's easier or better to work with the recruiters that are not specifically assigned to a company? Is that what it is, or part of the issue?
Yeah, so I won't say it's necessarily easier to connect with a recruiter at a staffing agency, right? Because they also have huge pipelines. So they're working on placing a candidate for potentially multiple tech roles in multiple locations. So they're juggling a lot of candidates, right? But at least getting in their network, connecting with them on LinkedIn is a really good start. Now, again, recruiters can really work to your benefit in the interview process, right? When you're already working one-on-one with them, they may be able to give you insight on what's coming up next for your interview process at that company. They probably have a strong relationship with that specific hiring manager where they can give you some insight about what that hiring manager is looking for, the things that they value in their next associate.
I even think they can even give you proper coaching. Because I've seen it before where the recruiter has been trying to recruit for so long for this particular job. They even know what type of questions, what type of concern the hiring manager usually have, and they coach you to actually go and do better and end the actual interview. Do you notice that as well?
So I want to be mindful about how we use coaching versus advising. Okay. I think recruiters are great at advising, right, for that specific process. But coaching itself is a specific strategy. There's kind of this rumor, if you will, or myth that career coaches don't have official training. But actually we do. There are, credentialings and certifications that are governed by a managing body, right, for coaching specifically. So I think recruiters can do a great job of advising you on the interview process that you're working with them specifically on, but not necessarily on the market as a whole as a job seeker.
So basically what they do is actually advise you on that particular job that they've been trying to hire for 3 months. It's not necessarily coaching, but it's, direct advising on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think about that as like a directive that you may get from somebody, from a superior at work, right? They're giving you the insight of, hey, we need to get this project done. Here's how I'd like you to execute it. Similar idea. Now, the other side of this, right, is what role does the recruiter actually play in the hiring process? And again, I think this has been a bit overestimated, if I can say, there's there's this kind of idea that getting in with a recruiter is like the key, the ticket to a job. In reality, recruiters are often not making the hiring decision. Now, that doesn't make their role any less important, right? It's just about managing the image of what their job is in that process. They can influence a hiring decision, but ultimately, they are the messenger of the hiring decision, not typically the one who is making it.
Yeah, but I do understand that, because their job is to go and source candidate and pre-screen them.
Right.
But sometimes they are very non-technical themselves, so they can only do some pre-screening.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's often times where even technical recruiters, especially those who may be a little bit newer, right, in technical recruiting, may not truly have full insight of what the day-to-day of that role looks like. And again, that doesn't take away from their responsibility in it, but it's become a miscommunication about what they actually are doing in that hiring process. And some of that has come from big name recruiter influencers, right, on LinkedIn and social media across the board, that it's not really a clear message. For someone who's never worked in a hiring space before, they may really not understand. And if it's a smaller company, it's possible you will be recruited and screened by the same person who is making the hiring decision. Typically in corporate, that's not how it's working.
Okay. Yeah, but you can, like you said, you can ask them for tips. You can ask them for the interview process in general. Is it more hands-on? Is it more panel format? So these things the recruiter can help you with, right?
Absolutely. And not only is it something that you can do, but it's something that you should do. So again, it's the difference between understanding, should a recruiter be giving you guidance within their interview process versus should a recruiter be coaching you, right? We actually recently had a student who forwarded over to me an email from a recruiter that was providing feedback on their resume. And the resume they had submitted for the role was actually not the resume that I had crafted with them. So I'm not surprised that they got, additional feedback about the resume. But the feedback that was being provided was not necessarily feedback that you would want to apply to your resume for every position. But remember, recruiters are not always, of course some are, right? Let's be clear. There are some recruiters who are certified resume writers, who are certified coaches. But if they're not, they're probably giving you guidance based on their specific experience in the companies that they have worked for. Whereas a coach's responsibility is to understand the job market as a whole and what works throughout that entire process.
So basically, these feedback may have been good for that particular job, and that's it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because not every recruiter is looking for the same thing. Right. And so as a coach, right, when we provide that guidance in our coaching, when we are showing somebody how to write a resume, we're also giving them that insight. It's coming with that caveat, if you will, right? That this is the resume standard. That doesn't mean that every recruiter is looking for the resume standard. It's just what we know typically works, what we know typically makes things easier. The key is to having a coach who's paying attention to the trends, right? Who is active on LinkedIn, who does connect with the recruiters who are active in these spaces, providing tips and insights. Because if I see a recruiter that's working in, let's say, a staffing agency, for example, right? They may share insights about resume writing. It may not be in line with standard resume writing, but then I know that at that company, that's what they're looking for. So it's about being really specific on how you coach and what technique you use. But the broad brush guidance doesn't really work.
Yeah, and is it because they are too specialized sometimes? They cannot give you, general coaching that you need?
Yeah, absolutely. When you are applying for a role, you're spending a limited amount of time with that recruiter, right? A coach is spending significant amount of time with their client or their student, whatever space they're working in, right? For example, our students, they can schedule with me whenever they need to. I'm also only one Slack message away. Sometimes that Slack message comes at 10 o'clock at night, right? And a lot of times they'll get an answer at 10 o'clock at night. So it's part of what we do is that kind of one-on-one time, whereas a recruiter is not going to have the bandwidth to spend that time with job seekers for every application, nor should they, right? I mean, we can't expect recruiters to spend 2 hours coaching somebody to prep them for a role. That would be unreasonable.
So basically, you are essentially warning students to be careful for recruiters posing as coaches or advising as if they were coaches.
Yeah, actually.
Sometimes it's not in the interest of deceiving you. It's just that they don't have the broader picture of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, when you coach, you're learning that person. You're spending the time listening to things like their communication style outside of a workspace, how they communicate when they're nervous versus when they're comfortable with you, right? These are not things that are typically happening within the time that you're spending with a recruiter. And I know that this is a hot take. Not everybody is going to want to hear that, but it's the reality of the difference between coaching and recruiting. Recruiters are not coaches. They have a valued part in the job market. They have a valued part in the time that a job seeker spends with them, but it's not the same as being coached formally.
So if networking with recruiters is not all the effort you should be making, so who else should you be networking with to increase your chances of talking to the right person to get the job?
So of course, credentialed coaches, right, are a good mix to add in there. But just diversify your network. Include people who are already in roles that you strive to be in. And also people who are in technical roles that you don't strive to be in, because you never know where your career is going to go or what guidance you may take, right? So you might network with somebody who is in a different role than what you're striving to go to, but previously worked in, let's say, help desk. They may be a good person to give you insight on how we got from help desk all the way up to this senior level position. Even if it's not the position you're applying for, there's applicable skills there, right? We've talked about having mentors. There's lots of mentors available on LinkedIn, but connecting with people in hiring spaces, and also anyone that you think may have a broader network where you can kind of pull in from that, right? Because if you're too specific, you're too specialized, you're not going to have the broad feelers that you need.
So basically what you're saying is recruiters is not the end all be all. You should broaden your network, diversify your network essentially.
Absolutely.
It should be a bit of not only recruiters, but coaches, alumni, for example, at Yellowtail Tech. If you are a student, you have access to a community of alumni that can support you and point you in the right direction. So essentially, the idea is make sure your network is well-rounded. Don't only try to interact and bombard recruiters, because they are only part of the process.